My name is Stephannie Widener, and I'm doing a presentation today on defending the defenseless, guarding the vulnerable in your life. And I want to thank all of you guys for being here today, and USCCA for having me here today. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and that will become clear why as we start going through the presentation. My son has some significant special needs. He's on the autism spectrum and will likely always be dependent upon me for his entire life. And so this is something that we have found we have to work into our defensive plans as we think through things, and it's become abundantly clear in a few situations why we need to do that and why that is important. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being here and giving me the opportunity to talk about something that's really important to me. So who am I? Nobody really, but I do think it's important that you know who you're getting your information to and why that information may or may not be qualified. Everybody can have an opinion. We need to be able to filter that through and make sure it's a qualified opinion, particularly if we are making decisions that affect our defensive plans and our loved ones. I started out several years ago with getting my basic NRA cert, so I'm an NRA certified pistol instructor, refused to be a victim instructor, and a certified RSO. Realized I needed to move on from there if I wanted to be able to help people. That's a really very beginning bar. I'm a certified graduate of the Law Self-Defense Instructor Program. I am the first certified active self-protection instructor, which is the most important thing to me. That is where I've learned so much of what I know and how I'm able to help a lot of people. Is anybody here familiar with active self-protection, our social media, YouTube channel, all of you? Hey, my fan club. Sam, hi. So, it is a defensive firearms training company, but if you know us, you probably know us for our social media presence, which is our YouTube channel, Active Self-Protection, Facebook page, Active Self-Protection. What we do is we take security footage of defensive encounters and analyze them for lessons learned. What happened, what could have been done better, what maybe wasn't so great, and what could be thought about. You know, what could you change? That was really important in my own journey, learning about self-defense, to understand that real-life defensive encounters didn't happen the way that I thought they happened. My experience with that was from my own imagination or from Hollywood. And as I started to watch these videos and realize this isn't how it happens, this person just walked into a convenience store to buy milk like I've done a million times after work, and in 10 seconds, everything changed. And to me, that was incredibly eye-opening, and I realized where I was at and what I knew and the skill level that I had was not adequate. So that really started me on this journey to learn. Right now, I'm the executive officer and an instructor with Active Self-Protection. We travel around the country teaching students. We do a lot with the social media, though, and that's one of the things that is really a blessing to me on that is we get to hear from people about weekly that have used information they've learned from the channel and from, this is John back there that runs the channel. I got an email where someone was telling me about their defensive encounter and said, the information that I got from you saved my life. Now we're quick to say, no, we didn't, we just provided that information. So happy to be a resource, tell me about it. And it culminated in this, I had a gun pointed at my chest, and it was John's voice in my head that I heard, and those are the instructions that I followed. Now to me, that's incredibly humbling and really just drives home the point that you have to know what you're talking about if you're giving people advice, to stay within what you know if you're helping people plan for their defensive plans, and to really pay attention to where you get it. So that is what I try to do. So that is why I wanted to share a few minutes about who I am and why I have an opinion about this. Most importantly, I'm a mom to 5 and a grandma to 1. We'll talk quite a bit about my youngest son because he is the one that is affected most by what I'm talking about here. He will likely be part of my life and part of my defensive plan for as long as I live. So that's something I'm still working and still learning. And now in an hour, I can't help you solve whatever problem it is whatever vulnerability it is in your life. But I hope to give you a framework and some things to think about so that you can make those decisions yourself. So how did I get here? Back in 1995, I was just getting married, just starting my family. One of the first things that I did was I made my husband sell all of the pistols that he had in the house. I was not comfortable with, you're laughing, it's so true though. I was comfortable with the idea of shotguns or rifles because they had a purpose in my mind. You could use those for hunting, you could use those for sporting, and yes, they happen to be helpful for self-defense. But I couldn't get beyond the idea, and what I told him was pistols are really only designed for violence and killing people. And I didn't want them in my house. And that much is true. They are designed for that, and they're really good at that. What I wasn't getting was that can be a really good thing. There's a lot of times where violence is a problem that needs, addressing a problem with violence is a good. It's important that you can right an egregious wrong with violence sometimes. And I didn't get that back at that time in 1995. So in 2005, it was really driven home to me that all I had was a really good attitude when it came to defending my family. I didn't have any skills, and I didn't really have a good plan. And that was driven home when my youngest came to live with us at 2 months of age. We were foster parents, and he was our foster son. And they chose us because we were sort of out of town in kind of a hidden place, and this was a really dysfunctional situation. Mom and dad were a little bit unstable, and normally they try to get the foster parents and the birth parents working together in sort of a mentoring relationship. In this case, we couldn't do it. So he was with us, and we had no interaction with the birth parents until the day that I got a call that an extended family member, Grandpa, was out of prison now, and the idea that we had one of his family members was an affront to him that he wanted to correct. Mom and Dad weren't really down with this idea, but they were along for the ride. So they called the social worker to warn her, and she in turn called me. I called the police, I called 911 that they were on their way to come kidnap this baby, which is what was happening. I called my husband and let him know, but the fact remained very heavy with me that I was the only thing that stood between a serious, imminent threat to 5 children under the age of 10. It was just me, and I was more than willing to die for these kids. That was never a question. That's an easy answer to not even a difficult question. The problem was that wouldn't have solved my problem. Dying doesn't do anything to protect my kids, so I can be willing to do it all day long, and that sounds really super noble and honorable, but that wasn't going to protect my kids that day, and that is what was important to me. So that really weighed heavy on my mind. Now, we had a really anticlimactic end to that story. The police showed up 25 minutes later, so that wasn't much help. The car, we lived at the very dead end of this dirt road, so when I saw the car that they described coming, we were the only house there, so I knew what it was. They pulled into my driveway, they sat for a few minutes while I readied myself for whatever was going to happen, and then they left. So it was really anticlimactic, and I thank God for that. I eventually did develop a relationship with the birth parents, but at this point, this really started the wheels turning in my brain that being willing to die for my kids wasn't enough. I needed a better plan. There was nothing I was going to do against the 4 adults in that car that wanted to cause problems and controversy. And I needed to be able to do that. So that was important to me. So in 2005, I realized that there's a problem. I didn't go out and buy a gun the next day. I didn't even know that you could at that time. I didn't know you could carry a gun around with you or any of that. So this was really the first thoughts to me that I could do something different. I could stand up against a grown man coming to my house and have some level of equality, some sort of equal playing field that we could work together on. And that was very appealing to me. So I began to pursue. I began to learn. That's how I ran into the different training. That's how I ran into the social media where I work now. And in 2019, I have a bit of training under my belt. I feel confident, I feel competent, I feel comfortable defending my family. I hope I never have to, but it's an entirely different place. And so that's kind of what changed over the years and kind of what started me wanting to help people do the same thing. So why does it matter? Well, because we aren't talking in abstracts. The stakes could not be higher. I get an email about every week from someone that says that the things they've learned on this channel, the things they've heard John say, the things they've heard on or read on our social media have impacted their decision making while they were in a defensive encounter. That's an incredibly humbling responsibility, and it drives us, and it should drive anybody that's an instructor or that's trying to help anybody to excellence, making sure the information you're giving is the best that it can be, making sure that you are a continual student and that you are always learning yourself, always challenging what you think is correct so that you can continue to give the best information. So who you listen to matters, and for some of you it may matter a lot. So that is who I am and why I am here. So who or what is vulnerable in your life? Vulnerable just means susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. Now, for some of us, for me, the main definition of that is trying to protect myself and my son when we're out. That is a lot of it. It could mean different things to different people. You may be more vulnerable in a different place. You know, if you're somewhere where you are disarmed, or somewhere that's generally more unsafe, or a situation where your focus is gone. Maybe you're having some health considerations that are taking some of your attention and focus. And so you're more vulnerable. Now, not only is that obvious to you, that's obvious to anyone that might be watching you. Okay, so it can mean defenseless people in your life or situations, and it's problematic because not only are you susceptible to physical attack or harm, but because so much of your resources are focused on dealing with that fact. When I'm out in public with my son, an awful lot of my resources are focused towards day-to-day life. They're not focused towards, scanning the environment or whatever. They're focused on just day-to-day life. It's painfully obvious to me. It's also obvious to anybody that's watching me. Bad guys aren't looking for a challenge. Most of the time, they just want what they want. And if they can get it from someone easier, why not? So the fact that I'm distracted, or that I have little ones, or that I have whatever, makes me easier. And we can be, frustrated by that, complain about it, but that doesn't change reality at all. It is what it is. So first things first, you have to think about what's going on in your specific situation, in your life. Where are you vulnerable? How is it, that time or place? Is it people that you're with? Is it a situation? And then just start thinking that through in your head. Start to make those lists. Is it when you are putting groceries in and out of the car and your focus is in that car, putting groceries there with all these other parked cars all around you? So you're a little bit vulnerable because you're not able to pay attention very well. What can you do to solve that problem, to make that a little more difficult for someone to approach you and cause you problems, to make it a little more difficult for them to sneak up on you because there's so many other cars there? That particular problem I solved by parking in the back of the lot so there's no other cars around me so I can watch. Getting my kids in the car and getting us locked up before we started the buckling process. These are easy things that you can do to just lower your risks and make things just a little bit easier for you, less to have to deal with, okay? So spend a little time maybe thinking like a predator. Where are your vulnerabilities? How can they be exploited? And what can you do to make that harder? How can you make it more difficult to exploit you? So you have to start thinking about potential harm versus certain harm. I mean, you don't want to terrify your children or the people that are in your care over being kidnapped by a stranger. The odds of that happening are infinitesimally small. So the idea of terrifying them and never letting them play outside and never letting them have friends, that's not a tenable solution. You don't want to do that. That you're causing certain harm over a very low risk. So you need to start to evaluate your risks, your odds, your stakes. The problem with these stranger kidnapping is obviously the stakes are hugely high. So it makes sense to address it, to think through it, but to really put too many constraints on your life over it doesn't make sense to me. Now, we had this familial situation where we did have some risks. That meant addressing that with my children, with my family. Our risks were higher, and so it made sense that, okay, we're going to take some of the cons with that just to address that risk. So that is what we did. So you think about your specific situation, what you bring to the table, and that should inform how you make your decisions and how you approach your training, your preparation, your education.